Leo said cryptocurrency for him is kind of unsettled. And I think that's pretty common sentiment. People are interested, they are even maybe optimistic, but they're unsure. And so, Nicole, tell us your view on not really the outlook of cryptocurrency, but for people who are kind of new to this, how would you explain what is cryptocurrency?
Well, we only have 20 minutes, right? So it's very complicated, actually, but I think the easiest way to think about it is a digital representation of value. So that can mean many things. It could be a store of value. We've heard a lot of people taking Bitcoin and keeping it for 10 years. That's one use. It could be a medium exchange. You could give cryptocurrency for another cryptocurrency or sell it for fiat. And that could also be a unit of account. So you could keep record of what things have happened, and you could also use it on blockchain if there's a particular use. So big definition, that's why there's a lot of excitement around it. There's a lot of things that can be done, and underlying blockchain is an important component. So common ones you would have heard of: Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ripple. There's actually thousands of them. So lots of different things going on and ways to launch them.
Cool. So during this panel, we're going to try and integrate cryptocurrency and blockchain. The two are related but different. And so Zach's going to give us a brief pitch on what he thinks blockchain is, how he would kind of try and summarize that, and how it's related to cryptocurrency.
Okay, so let's see. Blockchain is much more general. It's the technology underlying cryptocurrencies. Generally speaking, blockchain provides for trustless. It's a database that is distributed, so you don't have to trust one particular party to maintain it. So if there is any kind of information that multiple parties want to access, such as how much money do I have in my account, the people who you're paying want to know that, your bank wants to know that, you want to know this, or where does some particular property reside, who owns a particular thing. Various people need to access this information. Ordinarily, some central party would maintain a database saying who has this, maintain the ledger that shows how much is there and who owns this. But who else is going to trust that central party to maintain this? Make sure that it's not hacked, make sure that they're not changing this themselves. The idea of blockchain is to distribute that database among multiple holders. It's a way that improves that makes it harder to hack into it, and it means that if parties who don't trust each other and don't trust any particular third party can still say, well, together we will hold this database, we'll hold this ledger, and now we're all okay. Now, that's not for free. You buy this through some complicated consensus systems. That is, if people disagree on what the database should say, how do you decide who's right? And the system is slower. It famously uses a lot of electricity, so it's not free, but there are a lot of benefits to this. And cryptocurrency is sort of the first killer app of blockchain. So blockchain and technology has been around, the underlying pieces, since the 90s. But 10 years ago, when Bitcoin came along, this was when everyone started hearing about blockchain, because it's a natural application of blockchain.
So one of the reasons I think we're having this panel here is partly because we're in Chicago. I think many of you are probably all of you are familiar with this topic, but you're still kind of trying to learn more about it. One of the fascinating things is sort of how this is emerging in the Chicago marketplace. I think that what I was excited about was to hear Leo's history of financial futures, and how the first response was, well, if that is going to be done, that's going to be in New York. But now you think about, well, cryptocurrency, where should that be done? Is that New York? Is it Silicon Valley? But actually, given the history of trading here in this city, I would argue we are uniquely positioned as a hub for cryptocurrency. So Nicole, maybe you could touch on cryptocurrency as it relates to the city of Chicago.
Absolutely. I mean, you started off great. I mean, Leo brought us all the futures. We're a leader in this industry. And I got to tell you, I go to New York, and I think they're behind us. I think we have all the futures trading, we have a lot of the prop trading, we've got a lot of the technology, and we've got a lot of the programmers. So I think all of the activity is really happening here. I think we're at the forefront, and we're really leading this forward. I'm pretty proud of us. I think that we are primed to be leaders in not just for America, but potentially the world.
Cool. So in terms of the evolution of cryptocurrency, Nicole, you touched on Bitcoin and Litecoin and some of these other tokens that are out there. Ethereum, I think many people are familiar with. Zach, maybe you could talk about kind of the evolution of cryptocurrency as a market, as an asset class, this kind of now proliferation of cryptocurrency.
It's the right word for it because yes, I mean, as Nicole said, there are thousands of these out there now. So yes, famously you have Bitcoin, Ether, which is the token for the Ethereum network and such, and Litecoin, Ripple, Dogecoin, whatever you'd like. There are lots of these big cryptocurrencies out there, but a lot of that proliferation comes because of individual companies that issue their own token. So for years back, you had people raising money through Indiegogo and Kickstarter and so on, but they couldn't really give their donors a share of their company. It wasn't really an investment. So along comes regulations, crowdfunding, to allow these companies to raise money in small amounts from unaccredited investors and give them a stake in the company so you could really take on investors rather than just donors. But it didn't really have much volume. People were trying to do pre-sale, saying, here's my system, you can buy a coupon to use what I'm building as soon as it comes along. Like, I want to launch, a board game, and you can pay me right now for the first one, and when it's ready, you can buy this. And some of that worked. But then all those sort of came together, had a baby, and now here we have ICOs. That is, initial coin offerings. A lot of companies have used these to sort of do pre-sales or sell shares of their companies through security token offerings. And so, there's a whole question of legality of the ones that sort of fall in between there. So you can have tokens that people acknowledge are securities, and they jump through all the right legal hoops for that. There's some on the other extreme where the system's up and running and you're just selling the right to use it. Then there's sort of middle ground where the system's not up yet, but why don't you buy the right to use it down the road? And by the way, you can also sell that right to other people along the way, and maybe it goes up. Don't ask us about that. So there are all kinds of interesting legal questions about that. But however that comes along, lots of companies have used these issuances to raise a bunch of money through initial coin offerings, ICOs, the result of which is hundreds, now thousands of these various tokens. So people are trading the tokens, people are trading futures on some of the big ones. And it is growing leaps and bounds. Once again, just in terms of Chicago, obviously with the CME and the CFE both offering futures contracts on that, it just continues to grow.
So one of the big questions in this area is how should we even categorize this? We did an event last month, and that was actually focused on cryptocurrency as an alternative asset class. And so what's interesting to me is, I teach money in banking. When I first started talking about Bitcoin, the question is Bitcoin money? Is it a store of value? Is it a means of payment? But that discussion over the last few years has really shifted to, well, is Bitcoin a commodity? If we think about Leo's comments about the futures trading on commodities, now we have a Bitcoin futures contract. Is that a commodity contract? Or is Bitcoin a security? As Zach touched on, many of these cryptocurrencies are being issued that look much more like equity. And so the regulation around this, the legal definitions have become very debated. And one of the topics that actually came up, there's a gentleman here who asked me after a presentation I gave is Bitcoin a commodity or a security? So I'm going to turn that question to Nicole.
All right, well, it could actually be both. So the CFTC has determined that it's a commodity and can be regulated in terms of fraud and manipulation. If you have a futures contract, then that's going to be a futures, it's going to be a commodity as well, and it's going to be more of a commodity interest that's going to be regulated fully by the CFTC, and you're going to have to consider registration if you begin trading those instruments as an asset manager. Cryptocurrency can also be a security. So the SEC gave us a lot of heartburn for a while. Essentially, they said, how do you figure out if it's a security? You have to go back to a 1946 Supreme Court case called Howie, and you have to analyze the four prongs. Here's something. So essentially, is it an investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profits that are derived from another? So every single time you have a cryptocurrency, you got to apply this test. And the SEC has helped us a little bit. They've told us so far Bitcoin and Ether are not securities. They're going to come out of that realm, at least for now. as they're currently being used. But they can become a security if somebody might repackage them and have a new form where it's more of a profit derived from the efforts of another. So every single coin, you have to do this test, and you can't just assume that it's not a security, because in many cases it probably is.
Okay, so Zach touched on initial coin offerings, this proliferation of other currencies. So I would guess many of the people here are traders, and I would say, 2017, I often tell people, was kind of the year of Bitcoin, with you get that ramp in the fall in the Bitcoin price going up to 20,000. And so there's a lot of interest in this volatility, which makes it, I think, exciting for traders and also profitable. But people are, I think, also trying to figure out the ICO market. And should they be investing in some of these new coins? How do they differentiate legitimate coins from fraudulent coins? How is the ICO market going to be regulated? Maybe you could add something to that.
Sure, absolutely. So again, we take the Howey test, and we say, okay, there's an ICO. So an ICO, as Zach touched upon it, you're essentially raising money for, let's say, a blockchain project that you're going to issue a cryptocurrency as the reward for that. So is that ICO process a security? Probably. The SEC said virtually every ICO that they've seen is a security. Even perhaps the issuance of Ether might have been a security back then, but the SEC really wasn't on top of everything back then. So right now they're saying pretty much if it's an ICO, it's probably going to be security. So a lot of people are now going the route of what we call security token offerings. So they're STOs. So it's really the same thing as an ICO, but ICO's got a bad name. As you mentioned, a lot of people were doing a lot of frauds. They weren't following the securities laws at all. So now the encouragement is for people to do security token offerings. You end up with a fully regulated offering. It might be exempt. Your lawyers will help you with that. But the outcome ends up being a security token. And there's a lot of exchanges right now that are now getting licensed to be able to trade these security tokens. So this is huge for our industry, because a lot of institutional players will get involved now that they know that they're dealing with securities and it's a more regulated system.
Okay. So let's use that as a segue into Bitcoin futures, because I think, many people would say the Bitcoin cash market was in many ways a retail, just individuals, techies who are getting into this, but with the launch of the CME and CBOE Bitcoin futures contracts, we now have institutional investors. We have these contracts on regulated exchanges. These are traded in Chicago. And in the context of other financial futures that we talked about with Leo, why is this so important now and here?
Well, yes, just as Leo Mohammed said, that yes, we are in the insurance business. That as the blockchain industry and as the cryptocurrency industry grows, you have companies and individuals who are more and more exposed to the price of Bitcoin and other significant coins, and there was not a great way to hedge that. You could just flat buy the coin, but that's sort of a one-directional thing. It was not as easy to short this. I mean, it's sort of like hard to borrow stocks. Bitcoin itself is hard to borrow, much less various lesser altcoins that just have low volume. Try to find those to borrow them and short them then. On the other hand, when you have an active futures market, now you can take a short position if you want to hedge out your exposure to this. Plus, there is improved price discovery because of the active market on both sides of this now. And then just it's more efficient because of margining. Now you post margin. You don't have to buy the full coin cash, lock that much money up. You just wanted to reduce your exposure. Now there's an active market for that.
Right. So Nicole and Zach kind of started this panel. Again, this is a quick panel, but we've got a lot to cover. Talking about what is cryptocurrency, what is blockchain. And they tried to explain how blockchain is the technology behind Bitcoin. And so when we talk about the cryptocurrency market, we're often in turn talking about blockchain. But a question I have for you, Zach, is how do you think blockchain could potentially transform financial markets apart from cryptocurrencies? So, many people are now exploring blockchain applications to supply chain management, to energy trading, and so on. Blockchain could also change settlement and clearing and how we manage back office operations, which would be very transformative for markets like CME and CBOE. So what do you think about blockchain as it relates to financial markets?
So finance is one of the first and best applications of blockchain. We're going to see a lot of it, I think we already have, but all the more so, yes, in back office. It's not a panacea. There are things that blockchain doesn't do well. Again, it is a tool. Now you invented a screwdriver, doesn't mean you still don't need a hammer anymore. People sometimes try to use the screwdriver for everything because blockchain is everything, everything, everything. They want to be the blockchain of X. Fine. But there are a lot of things that blockchain can do. So for example, real estate. A lot of people are talking about making real estate transactions through the blockchain because it has two qualities that fit to this very well. It is a complicated transaction with multiple parties who don't necessarily trust each other very much, and it's not hugely latency or time sensitive. There's not a lot of HFT in real estate. People aren't buying houses and flipping them half a second later. Similarly, if you have swaps and various complicated structures on the financial side, where there are multiple parties who don't know each other or don't trust each other, and maybe you just want to clear this at the end of the day and figure out the record, that is, it's not a matter of get in, get right out, you have to track this very instant. That's a natural application for blockchain. It can make all these transactions happen. Well, that's first of all like the actual trade, but then also if there are cash flows that happen down the road because you've taken on this position, somewhat swap or this kind of thing where money must change hands in the future, you can set this up through a smart contract, which is, again, a blockchain concept. It will automatically make those monies change hands at the right times. So yes, I think you'll see a lot of application of blockchain in back office, not to mention trading more generally. If you want to, well, short panel, we can talk about other applications later.
Okay, more efficient, more secure, a lot of advantages. Okay, last few questions I have are going to come back to cryptocurrency. So Nicole, this issue came up in our May event. It's come up at a lot of things I've been at recently, the custodial issues around cryptocurrency. So for those of you who might be a little bit new to cryptocurrency, it's one thing I would encourage you to try and understand is what is a public key and what is a private key? And how do those differ? We're not going to have a chance to really explain all that. Maybe Nicole can touch on this, but one of the key issues around the trading and investing in cryptocurrency is who actually holds and manages the private key. Because that's really only the person who holds it is the person who owns it. And so the question is that key held by the exchange, by the individual, or by a third-party custodian? Maybe if you could touch on how that issue has evolved and where you think it's headed.
Right, well, exactly. There's different ways to store it. A lot of people want to take it off of the exchange because it's subject to theft. There's been lots of hacks and people got their money stolen. So they could take it off of the exchange, they could put it in a hard wallet or something similar and keep it themselves, or they could have a separate custodian. If you are a registered investment advisor, which many people here are, then you have additional requirements and you have to have what's called a qualified custodian. And so that custodian has to meet certain requirements and not all do. So there's a huge push right now for the kingdoms and the Northern Trust and everyone to be qualified custodians so that you could then put your money with them and you're not worried about holding your own wallet and somebody maybe breaking into your house or having some other issue, especially if you're holding millions of dollars for your clients.
That's right. And cold storage is something that we often maybe think of as it relates to data, but now this is an evolving issue. It's like you hear about people storing their private key on a thumb drive and then putting it in some sort of safety deposit box and thinking about, well, if you're going to be trading that, how do you both store it but also use it? So there's a lot of interesting issues here. Zach, we've talked some about risks involved in cryptocurrency. I think there's always price risk, and many people, that's the role of speculators and hedgers is trying to trade that. But what would you say are other risks in the cryptocurrency market, and in particular regulatory risk? Because there's so much uncertainty about how this is going to play out with the SEC and CFTC. How would you encourage people to think about the risks in this market?
Sure. So first of all, as you mentioned, price risk, especially in this market because the volatility is so high for these cryptocurrencies. So that's nothing to sneeze at there. There's a little good timing. Let's see. So yes, that is a huge thing. Also because there has been so much fraud in the past. A lot of these ICOs that are issued, little shady of whether they really are doing what they say they're doing, so it's not it's not uncommon for their price to go up by a factor 20 or then go to 0 very quickly. So this is not a long-term, well-established market that has low volatility. You see huge price changes in this. Then, as you said, regulations are still up in the air. Just as Nicole was pointing out about the SEC giving advice on what is and is not a security. And well, in retrospect, maybe Ether used to be, but we weren't there at the time, and now it isn't, so we're okay. A lot of things are changing. And it also depends on what your role in this is. So for example, I mean, if you are just buying and selling these currencies, that is these cryptocurrencies, you have one set of exposures to regulations. If you are running an exchange, now there's a whole different set of, am I allowed to list these tokens? That's why in the past, a lot of exchanges said, you must give us an opinion of counsel saying that this token is not a security because we're not licensed to list securities. So there's a question of whether particular exchanges could list these. And a big risk standing out there is AML KYC, so know your client, anti-money laundering, because of the anonymity or pseudo-anonymity of cryptocurrencies. You know that it's held by this strings of zeros and ones, this account holds it, but who is behind that? Are they in another country that implies some additional regulations? Are they exposing us, oh, I can't trade with them because of terrorist issues, or we have limits on trading with this or that country? If you, as an IB or an FCM or as an exchange or something, facilitate trading by this anonymous account, you don't necessarily know what you're getting into there. So there are restrictions on that. The rules in that are evolving, as well as money services business rules at both the state and federal level.
Okay, great. So final thing, and then I'm going to probably have time for about 2 questions. So just last month, July 20th, NFA issued a proposed interpretive notice regarding disclosure requirements for NFA members engaging in virtual currency activities. Zach, can you tell us more about this?
Sure. Quickly, there are basically 2 pieces. First is for CTAs, CPOs, IB, FCMs, whole 9 yards. They want you to disclose to your clients that, hey, yes, the NFA is looking over us, but the NFA doesn't touch trading of spot cryptocurrencies. Futures, yes. Spot, underlying, no. So to the extent that we're trading this, don't blame the NFA. So there's big, like, all caps disclosure saying, NFA didn't look at this, does not look at trading of the underlying. So there's that, first of all. Then secondly, the NFA wants these various companies to disclose to their clients risks that are specific to cryptocurrencies. Yes, in the past, we helped you trade futures on this and that commodity, but now that we're helping you trade futures on cryptocurrencies, here are some cryptocurrency specific risks you need to care about. On the IB and FCM side, the NFA and CFTC both wrote official advisories. They say, you FCMs, you IBs must give exactly these to your clients before they make a futures trade with you, or if they already had made futures trades with you, then within 30 days of when this rule becomes final, give it out to them. On the CTA, CPO side, they don't have specific language, but they have a list of topics saying, here are things you might want to think about. You probably got to think about whether your pool, your trading strategy has cryptocurrency-specific risks in these categories, and why don't you tell your investors about that just as a best practice before you get in trouble.
Boom. There you have it. 2 questions. What do we got? Nothing. Sleeping. Back here in the back.
On the NFA's position on cryptocurrencies, Tom Sexton over there has mentioned, I've talked to him several times about it. He basically frames it like this. He says, until there's the political will that shoves regulations down to them that they're going to regulate their members on, which there isn't yet, that they're not going to wade into that pool. Some think there might be a missed opportunity and somebody else will put an SRO up. We think the NFA would be a very logical arbiter, if you will, of CFTC rules, but it hasn't happened yet.
Okay, more statement?
Right, but I'd say, I mean, we're hearing the same thing. They kind of want to stay out, but it's a good opportunity for other SROs like the Virtual Commodity Association, you know, to come in and step in for, you know, a role that NFA is saying they don't want to take.
Back at it.
I highly recommend anybody in this room that's involved in any type of blockchain or cryptocurrency, get those guys' cards that are sitting there and get on their list, because they kind of keep you up on what the new stuff is happening, and it changes every other day. Is that okay if I mention that to you guys?
Go for it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Here, bro.
Well, I don't know. Bother her, man, that way I don't have to, you know, they're the keeper of a lot of the information. They're getting all the information shot into them, and then they send out a weekly newsletter to keep you up on what's going on. Because it's gonna change in the next week.
Absolutely.
True enough.
And just in the spirit of that, DePaul, you know, part of hosting this event, we're doing more work in blockchain. If you want to connect with DePaul, I'm happy to talk to you during break. We now have like an email portal, blockchain@depaul.edu. So if you have any thoughts or ideas about how the university as a whole could get involved in things you're doing, we'd be happy to partner with you. Any question? Do we have a question?
You mentioned the NFA and CFTC, SEC. What about the Federal Reserve? Have you any comment on their perspectives?
Yeah, you might
I'm a
be.
former Fed economist. So if you're interested in the Fed's view, they have a white paper on, it's not titled blockchain, but if you Google like Federal Reserve distributed ledger technology, there's a very nice white paper that they put out. Several of the Federal Reserve governors have given speeches on this. The Fed is just conservative and skeptical in general, and so they're not at all really excited about cryptocurrency, but they have not yet said, you know, we're going to stop this. I don't think they feel particularly threatened by it. Many people say, well, you know, is crypto going to disrupt the central banks? But in many ways, I think they're now evolving together. And if you're interested in this stuff, the Bank of England and the Swedish central bank are much more forward-thinking on central bank issued digital currency. You could look up something called the e-krona. It's not central banks printing paper, it's central banks printing digital currency.
Well,
So
that's because they're angling to eliminate cash and
It's
sweep.
a cashless
well,
society.
they're trying to provide a currency that does not depend on cash paper. We had one of their governors come speak at an event, and they're worried, just real quick, central banks are worried that cashless societies are all about banks. If you want to buy anything with electronic payments, it's through an account. Credit card, debit card. If you want to buy a burger at Epic Burger, you can't use cash. You guys know this? Argo Tea, some of their locations, you cannot bring in a $5 bill and buy a cup of tea. That's part of what central banks are worried about. Because people aren't using cash, stores are no longer, some of them are not taking cash, and so they want to develop, what is the evolution of money so that we have digital cash, not just electronic payments, digital cash. That's the future.
Amazon dollars with trust.
Could be. That's a kind of a scary future, but
I thought that was called Bezos.
all right. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time, so